at our future, and we are gathered here to see what can we do in terms of adapting to the future that's before us. I will take you through first a few steps as to how we got to where we did in Sri Lanka, and then we will start to look at a substance or a process that could probably save us from a pretty bizarre and a disturbing future that's going to be before us. So let me, with that, move on to where we are. If you look at ourselves in the national context, this country is quite amazing. We have a group of central hills which hold 2 monsoons, and as you can see, there is an incredible amount of biomass stored here in this area. It also is the area of greatest biodiversity, the mountains and the southwest corner. But today, it's been degraded at a tremendous pace. And even though we have these wonderful ecosystems that we all speak about, we are not innocent. We have also very, very actively contributed to the climate change that's before us. And here's some history I'll share with you. In 1979, when we were working, the government of Sri Lanka said in the nation's newspapers, no oil means no development, and less oil, less development. It is oil that keeps the wheels of development moving. And tragically, ladies and gentlemen, that view has not changed up to date. This is why we stand here, desperately trying to see whether we can indeed sensitize the process that is going on in this country that they call development to reflect on what we are doing to the planet and to ourselves. And in comparison, let's look at a group of indigenous unlettered people, the Shuar of Ecuador. They live over massive deposits of oil, and they will not let anybody drill there because they say oil represents the spirits of the dead. Ask it for power and you sacrifice your children. Today, in the times of climate change, we can say never a truer word has been said. Look at the unlettered people, the Shuar of Ecuador, and look at the government of Sri Lanka. Who do you think is wiser? What we have done is we are sold a myth of economic development through the consumption of fossil fuel. So, like rats in a trap, we are said, work harder, happiness is just around the corner. Then you can buy more things. You know, run, earn more money. You can buy more things. Happiness is around the corner. And that's what development, current economic development is. They doom us like a bunch of rats to run around searching for more and more money to make us happy, which it never will. Of course, eventually what it does, it leads us to addiction. Addiction to fossil fuel, addiction to energy. And today in Sri Lanka, since we are so addicted to energy, we know what the energy supplier, the Ceylon Electricity Board, is doing to us. And we take it gladly. Okay, here's the price of addiction to our atmosphere on this planet. Tragically, today, I'm sad to say that we have passed the 400 parts per million mark. We are heading into disastrous times. And as the carbon concentration of the atmosphere increases, so does the certainty of a hotter future. The future is going to get hotter, and there is no stopping it. Of course, people will say, well, air conditioners or whatever, but the reality of a hot and a heating environment is this, that as the temperature rises and as the temperature passes 37 degrees, which is the optimum temperature for the functioning of chlorophyll, and we all learnt about this when we went to school, photosynthesis. photosynthesis starts slowing down because there's enzyme breakage. And as the temperatures increase to over 46, 47 degrees, production stops. Starvation will begin. Now here we are trying to adapt. We are talking about adaptation to climate change. I see no way that we are going to adapt to live in environments that are over 48 degrees. The projections today say that certain parts of the Middle East will be unlivable except for buildings that are air conditioned. And of course, for food production, forget it. You're not going to get any food production. Now, have we thought about this? What should we do? How can we respond to this? These should be the questions we should be looking at. Because if we get a hot spell in summer next year, our rice production could go down by 30–40%. Are we ready for this? And tragically, looking around my country, I can't see much. Okay, let's get on. Another significant feature with climate change is the rising sea level. And as we have seen, the sea levels are rising constantly. Again, there has been no major mapping of the areas that are vulnerable, nor of the ecosystems that are vulnerable. And as sea level rises, coastal vegetation of course disappears, and the salt comes further and further until it starts the loss of coastal vegetation. Saltwater intrusion begins by rising sea levels, and of course in Sri Lanka, much of our rice paddies that are in the coastal area are going to get salinated. What are we going to do about it? It would be handy if we could know what. Again, adaptation. But of course, to adapt to anything, we have to understand our ecosystem. We have to understand what we are living in. And we must understand that there are two distinctly different ecosystems on any part of this world. And they are called anthropogenic ecosystems and natural ecosystems. Another tragedy with the Convention on Biological Diversity and Biodiversity is we still have not come to grips with the fact that there are two distinct ecosystems requiring two distinct approaches of management. One is natural ecosystem where exotic species are an anathema. The other is anthropogenic ecosystems where exotic species are essential. So without considering these two aspects of biodiversity, we sail on to say biodiversity. We sail on to have biodiversity projects. It's tragic. We must learn our land, we must learn how to evaluate our land, and we must learn how to distinguish and differentiate our land. Why? One reason to adapt is this, that anthropogenic systems are much more responsive than natural systems to rapid climate change. Because we humans can landform faster than at a geologic scale. We can move in our machines, our muscles, we can cut, we can dig, we can move water, we can plant, so we can move much faster than nature does. But the natural systems contain both the genetic and the ecosystemic information, and they function as a major repository of the genetic wealth present in any nation. So both of these ecosystems are important. Both these ecosystems are critical. How are we going to manage them? And to do that, we have to look at things at a landscape scale. So in any planning, any landscape, the baseline must be the watershed. In this figure I have shown you, you can see a little city there by the river. This is anthropogenic. On the side there are agricultural fields which are anthropogenic, and then as you climb the mountain there is the natural systems. And this all lies within what is called a watershed. where the rainwater falls, where all of it collects. Our planning in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, still has to be done on a watershed basis. We cut across boundaries in making our cities, in making our urban areas, which is also a problem. Because when creating urban areas in a watershed, the maximal sustainable yield of ecosystem services of each watershed should be the defining parameters. Also, this is in terms of water, water retention, water recharge, air, and air production. There's another aspect with cities that we are now moving into, which has a very strong bearing on climate change. Sri Lanka says we are moving into make a megapolis, mega cities. Consider, for every ton of concrete, there are 800 to 900 kilograms of carbon dioxide produced. For every ton of steel, there is 1.2 tons of carbon dioxide produced. We are making these huge constructions. Has this nation reported on the carbon dioxide that we are going to produce by making these huge constructions and the carbon dioxide that it's going to take to maintain these constructions? If we have not, we've cheated. And we are sailing off into making mega cities and megapolises without even considering what we are doing to the planet as a responsible nation in terms of managing the climate. Next, let us look at the major watersheds in Sri Lanka. This is what we have.